Welcome back to Media Rebel Unplugged. I'm Janice. Today on the show, we're talking about something that touches all of us, even sometimes when we don't notice it, and that is grief. And I feel like there's no better time to talk about grief than today, given the sad and tragic event of what happened on September 10th to Charlie Kirk. My guest is Marie Alessi. She is a best-selling author, a TEDx and keynote speaker, and a grief advocate who helps people navigate loss in all forms. Welcome, Marie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Janice. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Would you just share a little bit about your journey and what led you to focus on grief?
Yeah. How long have we got? But in a nutshell, my journey with grief started when I was 20. A week after my birthday, my dad suddenly passed from cancer. He had been sick for a while, then he was in remission, then the cancer came back, and within a month today of being diagnosed again, it took him. And that started my journey into something that I had no idea how to handle. Nobody teaches you how to deal with grief, how to handle grief. We're not taught that at school, and nobody really likes talking about it. This is why I find conversations like we have today so important. Fast forward quite a few years, I moved to Australia. I met my husband 10 months after moving here, and another 10 months later, we got married. We were that couple. Everybody was just going, like, oh, look at Rob and Marie. It's so sweet, and holding hands. And I was in absolute happy land, And I also felt that losing my dad so early gave me what I call a hidden gift in adversity, which meant I was fully present in my relationship, and so was Rob. And we had date nights. Even when the kids were born, we did date nights at home to stay connected, to stay in each other's presence, because we really enjoyed each other's presence. And Rob always put me on a pedestal. And when the kids were 8 and 10, Rob went on a business trip to Perth, the other side of Australia, and he never made it home. He died very unexpectedly at the age of 45 from a brain aneurysm while he was away on a business trip. And that really pulled the rug underneath my feet for a moment and brought back a really pivotal, profound conversation that Rob and I had only 3 years prior. He came home late from work one day and he called me on the way home. He said, babe, I'm going to be 2 hours late. There's an accident on Heathcote Road, and that road goes all the way through the national park. There is no quick turnaround. There's like a 2-hour detour. And we learned later that night that a young dad had lost his life in a front-on collision with a truck. His daughter was only 16 months old. So it really hit home for us because the boys were so little, and it prompted us to have the conversation. What would you do? What if? And still we thought that conversation was theory, right? But in that conversation, we promised each other that if something was to happen to you, to me, I would want you to create the happiest life for the boys and yourself. Because that's what love is. Love just wants you to be happy. And that promise became my North Star in my darkest hour.
That's a very powerful path that you have gone through to be where you are today. And then to also find that strength through your adversity to say, now I want to help others. So, how did that path then come about?
That path came about with having a massive breakdown at its root of all of that. So we had the week of Rob's funeral. The funeral was a midweek funeral on a Wednesday, and the same week on the Sunday, I walked down the aisle with our youngest son for his first Holy Communion. And that night, I had a major breakdown. I was literally started over the boys bickering while they were brushing their teeth, and a couple of times I called up and, nothing changed. And then all of a sudden, this sentence burst out of me, and it was like, boys, I just need peace and quiet. It came out of nowhere. It was so unexpected for me. And as soon as I said that, it was like a valve had opened, like with a pressure cooker. You just can't close it anymore. And I started saying and shouting that sentence over and over, and it just built and built and built. And at the end of it, I was primal screaming on the kitchen floor, whacking the cupboard doors. And I don't even know how I got to the floor. I can't remember falling. I can't remember sitting down. I just remember this. It was like an out of body experience, me screaming and whacking the cupboard doors, and I was out of it. And then the thought of the boys witnessing that literally just snapped me back into my body. And I was mortified of what just happened. I was so scared. I was mortified. It was the worst parent moment ever. I thought I had failed them. They just lost one parent and now I'm losing my marbles.
Yeah.
So what followed was a really quite deep conversation with the boys explaining or trying to explain what just happened, and me realizing in that moment, in that conversation, that I too need help. I've been looking after everybody else to be there for them, to create the most amazing celebration of life for Rob, to make the day for Jed, our younger son, at the Holy Communion as beautiful as possible with the help of his godparents. But that night, I had nothing left. I realized all the tick boxes were ticked. There's nothing left. And I just collapsed. And in that recognition of I too need help and stating that and promising the boys I would do that because I never, ever want them to experience anything like that again. The next week, I was sitting in the office of a positive psychologist, Emily. She was an absolute angel sent to me. And I was talking to her about this expectation, how society expects you to fall apart, expects you to, this is really heavy. Your life is pretty much over as a widow. Like that's in a nutshell how society sees it. And I did not want to succumb to that expectation. And I told her about how heavy that weighs on me. And she said, "So what does grief mean to you, Marie?" So gently, so soft. And the first word that popped up was empowerment. And it surprised me that that word popped up when she asked me about grief. And I thought of that primal power that you release when you're going through something so horrific. And I also realized that you can utilize that power for something very, very different. And in that moment, I looked at her and said, "I think I need to write a book about this." And she said, "I think you should." And 5 weeks later, I had written and published my first book called Loving Life After Loss. And that ranked in the top 100 bestseller list of Amazon Australia. I did not see that coming. I didn't expect that at all. And with that, I knew I had something the world needed. I gave them hope and something beautiful to look at where they least expected but needed the most. And out of that, I started a movement with the same title. And in that movement, I took about 5,000 people on their path to healing in a course of 5 years. And then I archived the movement because after 5 years, I was really ready for the next step. And it was an amazing story. So I published another 2 books in that time and did my first TEDx talk. And I'm now about to publish my fourth book. That's coming out on October 10th. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. So that is my journey in a nutshell. It's like as nutshell as it possibly comes. Yeah.
It's ironic that that first word you had was empowerment, and it really has seemed to have empowered you in this journey that you're now on. And it's so hard when we go through loss of any kind, particularly when it's somebody that you love so deeply, to see the positive outcome that can come from that. To take something, and I always say it's our reaction to adversity that really shapes us. And you
Thank you. I
clearly,
love that. Yeah.
yes, you clearly ran with it. And I think that's wonderful.
I love that you say that because so many people are in this state of victimhood or self helplessness. And I understand that there's no judgment from my end, but it is not the loss that defines us. It's what we do with it. Exactly what you just said. And I love that you said that. It's such an important message. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I can say that because I've had my own losses. And in fact, last night, just randomly, it hit me. And I think it's one of the things that as we age, I started to reflect on all of my family that I've lost and how little that I have left. So just thinking about the holidays are coming, and I used to walk into a room
Yeah.
full of family, and they're all gone. And it's just, it's surreal. And again, it's something like you said that we don't talk about. We're not taught
Yeah.
about grief. And I think grief for everybody is different. I didn't expect to just randomly get hit with, I miss some of my family,
Yeah.
but it's a sad truth. What are you seeing as the most misunderstood thing about grief?
Without a doubt, I would straight away pick that grief will last forever and grief will stay with you forever. And I need to explain this because I understand where people are coming from, and as you said, you have it in the middle of the night, unexpected. So this is me versus society, okay? So society usually says grief will stay with you forever, it lasts forever, it will never go away. Grief is just an expression of how much you loved. I don't agree with any of that. Although I understand the truth in that, I really do. I see it slightly different, and that slight difference makes a huge difference in the outcome. So for me, I see grief, I treat it like a visitor. Grief was certainly a permanent resident in our house when it first happened, but there was a time where I realized that she needed to move out. We had been so intimate that we were sitting in the bathtub together sobbing. And then there was a time where I felt like, you've overstayed your welcome. I never asked you to move in. It's time to go. And that was the moment when joy moved back in, because all of a sudden there was this space in our house. And I have developed a really beautiful relationship to both, to grief and joy. But joy is moving in permanently, and grief moved out and became a visitor. So that's the way I look at it. I don't want grief to ever go away. I truly believe that we can heal through this, and that grief doesn't have to stay with us all the time. But grief can knock on a door very unexpectedly when I'm super busy, and I'm like, there's again my moment of, how do I handle it? Do I say, yep, come on in anyway? Or do I say, hey, we can talk about this later. Right now, I'm doing XYZ, It really is like that. And we do learn how to compartmentalize as well when we need to, because there are times where we need to function, let's be real here. There are times, I'm a sole parent, I run my own business, and there are times where I can't just allow that to come in at moments when I need to step up and hold space, i.e. for a client, or do a group call, or stand on stage sharing a message, So I needed to learn to compartmentalize that. But I also learned that when I have a moment where I'm like, okay, I'm ready, let's do this, because I know you've been sitting there waiting to come out, Oh, you can feel it. You can feel when there is, you need to cry, and you don't allow that release. And the release is so important. It's so important to release whatever emotion you have. If that's joy, express it. If that's grief, cry it out. It's okay. And that to me became really, really important, to handle it that way. And the whole idea of, grief is just an expression of how much you loved. Why can't happiness be that? So my promise to Rob, I want to create the happiest life possible, became, the more happiness I can create, the more I can get that from the love and connection that Rob and I built together. So there's another way of expressing that. It doesn't have to be grief. Who said that it has to be grief to show how much you loved? I don't want that. I want to create the happiness to show how much we loved and how much we built this together. So we have choices, and people often don't see that because of what society is trying to teach us about it. And I don't agree with it.
I agree with you. Grief is not a linear path. It
Not at
is
all.
not predictable. And as you said, we have to let out those emotions. Otherwise,
Yeah,
it'll eat us
you do need
alive.
to. Yeah.
And it's that self-care. It's like this reoccurring conversation. No matter what the topic is, we always come back to the self-care part of it.
Always. Yeah. And throw in self-love as well while we're there. It's so important. So important.
Right, because we give so much to others, especially as mothers, we give so much love to
Mm,
everybody, and it's so important to reflect on the love that we have for ourselves
yeah.
and strengths that we have and the courage that we have to keep on going on and empowering ourselves just as you have.
Yeah.
So we had started the conversation, touching on what had happened with Charlie and I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about it because I felt like I'm hearing two different sides. You either have people who are mourning this person that they didn't know personally, or you have other side of it, or people going, why do people feel so sad about his
Mhm.
passing?
Yeah.
And I would really love to hear your insights into public
Yeah.
mourning and how it's different than private grief.
Yeah, there's something really interesting that happens with the public mourning, because it forms a connection like no other. When you think back 9/11, how people came out of the woodworks, like literally running, coming for help. 9/10 now with Charlie Kirk, it was such a shock wave that rippled through the nation, and that public mourning really brings people together. It makes us realize what we have in common in that very moment, rather than what divides us. And very ironic in a way, what he spoke about in that very moment, that there was such a division about that. And he took a stand, he spoke up for that. And in that very moment of that horrific assassination, his wife and his young children, 3 and 1, watching, witnessing that, and the entire nation witnessing that. And then the ripple effect of the videos being sent around on social media by the hundreds and thousands. There was this absolute shock that came with that. First of all, how can this happen? How can this ever be okay? No matter what your political stand is, how can this ever be okay to do something horrific like that? And then B, how can it be okay to let that ripple all over social media? Only, huge quotation marks, only saw a blurred video, unexpected. I opened my social media and that is the first thing I saw. And I was like, oh my God, I still have goosebumps just thinking about that moment. And I recorded a video that day taking a stand, not a political stand, because I really don't do this publicly because my role is somewhere completely different in my life. But I took a stand about how can this be okay that we send this around? And how can it be that other videos like a breastfeeding mother gets flagged for a spammer or against community standards on Facebook for posting a video like that, but that is okay? And the next thing that happened is my social media, my Instagram account got shut down and deleted permanently. And I'm like, how on earth is that okay? How did what I said go against community standards? I simply took a stand that there are other things way more important in life than sharing something like that. So the public mourning is really a way to express that shock that hit all of us and that connects us in a time where we really need that. And I understand that there is one group that doesn't understand that at all because they're like, well, you didn't know him personally. How can this, affect you in such a way? I don't understand how it can't affect you. Once we become witness to something like that, it really is such a massive highlighter of what needs to change in our society, in our politics. We need to stand in unity, really. That's what we need. We need love, we need connection, we need to stand in unity and not give into that division and make that bigger and brighter, which happens when somebody takes a stand and therefore gets brutally murdered in front of everyone. That causes more division than ever. Is horrific, and nobody has the right to do that in my eyes.
I appreciate your feedback and I agree that it is amazing how collective grief can make people feel connected. As you said, taking the political stance out of it, at the end of the day, it's about our humanity. It is about that human connection. It's about at least having some type of empathy for Charlie's close friends and family, and especially those
Yeah.
even those that were in the audience witness to it. There's so many feelings that they
Mm.
are going to have to deal with now.
Yeah.
And it is sad that we have to explain to some people about why there is this mourning for this public figure. But I feel like in the world of social media, we're desensitized,
Yeah.
unfortunately, by
That's the
it.
perfect word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say, I witnessed it myself with my 16-year-old son. This
Yeah.
isn't a video game.
Yeah.
This isn't a movie.
Mm.
This is real life. This was a man who mattered to somebody and
Yeah.
people, and now his children will not have their dad, and his wife will not have her husband. And like you said, we really need to unite and we need to take a stand against this type of violence on social media. It was actually one of the things that was brought up in the Senate meetings with the CEO of TikTok.
Mm.
And some of the things, and I don't know if you saw this, but some of the things that they were very upset about was the amount of genocide that was being shown on the platform that they refused to take down.
Yeah. I did hear about it, but the desensitization that is happening with all that our children are exposed to these days, it is almost impossible to not expose them to that, whether that is through video games or through movies. Like I have 2 sons, mine are 17 and 15, so very same age bracket like yours. And the amount of times they watch movies with their friends where I'm like, how can you watch this? This is just, and of course, a lot of people would say, like, well, just tell him not to. It's almost impossible to do that these
Oh,
days,
yeah.
because they are exposed to it everywhere and they are in this mindset of, well, it's all just make believe, mom. It's all just make believe. I can't watch it without sleepless nights. I wouldn't even force myself to watch it because I can't get anything out of it. I don't like being scared, and that's the other thing. There is so much fear rippling through the nation that this horror really causes a lot of fear, whether you're consciously aware of it or if it sneaks in subconsciously. It spreads fear into the masses. And that's when the public mourning is so important, because that's when you realize I'm not the only one going through this. Like, everybody else around me is feeling that, or the majority is feeling that. And you need to express that, coming back to expressing emotions, expressing your fear, your shock, your horror. Like, that is really important to be able to express that and mourn publicly. So I watched a video of Erica yesterday with her speech and addressing the nation, and I we could all witness, the emotional waves she would be going through walking out there and choosing to deliver a speech like that. Wow. It would have taken her so much 11 days after well, that's the video that I watched was 11 days after. That it is just mind boggling. And I was in awe of her to be able to do that.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that, being that grief can be even more complicated when it's in the public eye. So for
Yeah.
someone like Erica Kirk, who is dealing with this very public loss, she is
Mm,
now thrusted
yeah.
into position of power as the CEO of their organization.
Yeah.
And while I think that the public is seeing it held gracefully,
Mm.
I can only imagine what that must be like for her,
Behind the scenes.
all the things, right? So,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to Erica?
Oh my God, I would love to sit with her, seriously. I think the biggest advice, and I know how ironic that sounds, but I always say that the biggest advice that I want to give is, please don't listen to anybody else's advice when it comes to grief, because mostly that advice comes from people who have not experienced what you have gone through. What she has experienced is very unique, and very few people before her have experienced that. I mean, I'm just thinking of John F. Kennedy, and his wife. She had experienced something rather similar. So that's what I'm saying. There are very few people who have experienced exactly what she has experienced. And even then, their situation is so different because their background is different, their relationship is different, their circumstances are different, their children are different ages. So please don't succumb to that pressure. Like, everybody will bombard you with what you should do and shouldn't do and how to mourn. And for her to have to be in the public eye when saying goodbye to her husband, I think that was brutal. That was really brutal. I believe that this very moment should have been kept private, and then you could have still had your public celebration of life for Charlie Kirk. I think it is important to do something like that for the public. Very, very brutal how exposed and unprotected she was in that from an emotional point of view. So I I really feel it would be very, very important for her to have somebody to sit with her and hold space for her. Most people go into expressing and talking about it. All of that is important and necessary. But the most important part in this very beginning stages, I cannot stress enough about it, is to have somebody to just hold space for you and witness your grief. Just sit with you. I wish and I hope that she's got somebody like that. I don't know the answer to that, if she does or doesn't, but that would be amazing.
I saw the video of her with Charlie in the
Yeah.
casket, and it appeared that she took the video, and I couldn't help but wonder because it's been met with some criticism. I'm very careful to not criticize somebody going through grief. Again, I think we all handle that very differently. But
Yeah.
do you think that it could also be a form of shock?
Of course, 100%. Yeah. And I also have to say, for full disclosure, I did not see that video. I saw her speech, but the video of her with Charlie in the coffin that was explained and shared with me. So I had no idea that she filmed that. And absolutely, that can be shock. But also, maybe that is exactly what we just touched on before. Maybe that is the deep for needing to be witnessed in her grief. And that is absolutely okay. That is not for public show at all. This is the needing to be witnessed. I didn't realize that part that she filmed that, but that would make a lot of sense because we all do need that. We need to be seen in our grief. We need to be allowed to grieve and not be told what to do or not to do or how to handle it differently.
I think she handled it well for somebody going through such an emotional
Yeah.
moment of she
Yeah.
kinda, like, ripped his tie and she showed holding his hand. It's amazing to me the amount of judgment that people get in their moments of grief, and it's not just for
Yeah.
Eric, just in general. The judgmental part instead of allowing grace for somebody going through such a horrible experience for them, and
Mm.
I'm really not sure what I would say to somebody like that because it just seems so mind-boggling to me that we wouldn't have that empathy for people.
Yeah.
Again, that just takes us right back to the same thing that we've been saying in the world of technology and social media and video games. It's, taking away our humanity to some
Yeah.
talking about the loss of a person, um, I think there's other forms of grief that I know I have experienced, and that's in milestones, whether
Mm.
that's, loss of a job, loss of a home, and even the loss of people that are still alive, like mourning a friendship that's ended
Yeah.
or a family member that maybe is just unhealthy for you to be around, like given their toxic behaviors. So, why do you think these losses affect us so deeply, even when no one has died?
Because all of us have got this really deep seated need for belonging. We all have that. It goes back to, I don't know if you're familiar with family constellation. Does that say anything to you? So it's basically showing what our constellation as a family is. We need to be part of the pack. It comes back to cave time, really. Like the one who left the pack was exposed to probably dying. It wasn't safe to leave the pack because the pack looked after you. The pack cared for you, and one hunted and the other gathered. But we needed that pack. That family was really, really important. So this deep-seated sense of belonging really stems back to cave time where we needed each other in each other's lives. And we still have that. We still have that wanting to belong. So when somebody dies or when you lose a friendship over whatever the case, whatever the reason is, I lost 3 really, really close friends of mine in the passing of Rob, and people that I thought would be in my life forever. And it hurt me so deeply because to me, it was like an additional loss in my already grieving Rob. What I learned later, because I did not have the capacity to see that in that very moment, I was inundated with everything else that was going on in my life. And being a sole parent all of a sudden and having my 2 young sons to look after, I had no capacity for anybody else or understanding what anybody else was going through. All I cared for, and I'm saying that wholeheartedly, all I cared for was how I would get through this with our 2 young boys. I couldn't open my capacity up to anybody else. So I was quite blind and oblivious to how other people grieved Rob differently. But I learned that later when I went through my healing, when I went through, gaining more capacity, more understanding, being more open to what was actually going on in a friendship. I was very reflective of, okay, what was my part in that? What was their part? And I very quickly realized that it was not about pointing fingers or whose fault was it or who said or did what or said or did not what. It wasn't about a blame game. It was about, okay, we grieved Rob differently and it just simply didn't align. So our paths just parted there and then. And I am not sure if that's forever. At the moment, it feels like that. It's already been 7 years and nothing changed in those friendships. And to one of them, I even deliberately closed the door because it felt very toxic and unhealthy for me, the way she responded and held space for me, not. So there are decisions that you make. And when you go through something like that, some of the friends that you really thought would be there for you forever just disappear out of your life because they just grieve differently or understand things differently or have different beliefs, and that is okay. They're not a bad friend because of that. They're just different in their beliefs, and that's okay. Other friends or people come out of the woodworks that become friends that you would have never seen coming. They all of a sudden show up in your life, and I was like, wow, I never realized what an amazing person you are. And again, that's not coming from a space of ego because you're now doing these things for me, because again, we all grieve differently, and all of a sudden there's this alignment that I never saw we had. Extreme situations bring out all parts of you, and this is when you realize where alignment happens or where you're not aligned. That's it. There are no good or bad friends in this. It's just different. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it can't hurt. It definitely hurt. But yeah.
As we've stopped dealing with those emotions that we feel from that, it's okay to be angry and to feel hurt.
Mm.
And I think it's just a
Yeah,
stage that we go through as we're doing our own healing. But
absolutely.
with that being said, other than dealing with our own emotions, what are some practical ways someone can support themselves as they're going through grief?
The most important part for me was to learn to set healthy boundaries. I didn't know how to do that at first. I would either let people walk all over me and then suffer the consequences later, or I would set boundaries so harshly that I then regretted how I said it. I couldn't find a healthy way to express them at first because I was in so much grief that I didn't have the right words. And I'm usually not one lost for words, but in that situation, it was really tricky for me. But I also realized how important it was for the boys that I learned how to set healthy boundaries, one, to protect them, and two, to teach them how to do that for themselves. It was really, really important. And the most important lesson that I learned in all of that, and I want to even say in my entire life, was self-love. That was everything. It is the base of everything to me these days. And I'm not perfect at it, far from it. Yet I realized how important it is to learn to love myself through the storm and through. It is easy to love yourself when everything's perfect. When you've lost the weight, when you've done your hair right, when you've done this, when you're successful at work, when you've got this beautiful partner next to you, when you've done all right with your kids and they love you. It's perfect. It's easy to love yourself. It's not easy when you go through the, excuse my French, shitstorm of all of it. When you go through the highest waves and the deepest currents, when you go through that, that's where it's more important than ever. When you love yourself despite and with everything that you're going through. And that's where it becomes your base that you can stand on. You really need to love yourself through the storm. It's so, so important. That's my biggest message. If you only take one thing away from this, it's self-love, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Self-love is important and it's difficult and it's crazy how difficult it is.
Yeah.
But again, it's such a necessity that we cannot ignore. What is the first step that someone should take in self-love if they're struggling right now?
It sounds so quirky to say that, but say it out loud to yourself. Even when nobody's, or in particular when you're just starting out and it feels funny to you or weird to you, start saying it to yourself in a mirror, in a car. When you start the car, flip the mirror down. I love you. Just start doing that. And it does feel so awkward at first. It really is weird. But the more you do it, the more you realize how important it is for you to say it and to hear it. And when you say to the mirror, you say it and receive it at the same time. And this is also where you can feel the lack of it. When you feel awkward about it, then you're really lacking it big time. So the more awkward you feel, the more you need to do it, because the more you need it and the more you will become comfortable with it.
I don't know if you've ever seen the Beauty and Beast movie,
Yeah,
but
of course. I'm a girl.
where Gustav is leaning over the mirror and he's talking about how handsome he
Oh my God, I love it. Yes, absolutely. See, take an example of that. It's perfect.
is. Typically the first thing that I could think of.
Oh, I love it. It's so good. So good. And speaking about movies, I want to throw that in as well, because when I said, treat grief like a visitor, it's almost like in a movie Inside Out. Grief might be there in the room, but she's not always at the switchboard. That to me is a really beautiful comparison. I prefer The Visitor, but when we stay with movies, that works for a lot of people to understand that analogy.
I can see that and agree with you
Yeah.
on that movie as well. So I
Yeah.
love any time that we can take like a real visual like that and give it to people.
Yeah.
It's so much easier for us to have that connection. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. And thank you for being here today. For people that would like to learn more about you and your books, being that we're over here in the United States, are we still able to get your book?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because my books are all on Amazon and the links that I have to my books are all international links because then it opens up in your country, in your Amazon. So the best way to do that is to go to my website, mariealessi.com, and you can find the books, you can find my DIY courses, you can even book a chat to me directly if you want to have a chat about something or just get my opinion or see how I can be of service to you.
And we will include those links in the description for everybody as well.
Thank you.
We will be making posts and we'll be tagging you in everything that we do because I think that your work is so needed and it's amazing and it is empowering. And I really thank you and commend you for everything that you're doing.
I really appreciate that, Janice. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you for everybody listening today. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe because we don't want you to miss out on another wonderful conversation like the one we had today with Marie. We will see you next time.